everyone, welcome to Rock Book Show. I'm Kimberly Austin, and joining me today is Carol Miller. Nice to see you, Carol.
Oh, thank you very much for wanting to interview me.
Well, you're welcome. We've gone through a lot to get here. We have been through hurricanes, nor'easters. Yeah. Were there zombies?
Yeah, whooping cough.
Which is worse than zombies, really, physically. You were actually wooed to write this book.
HarperCollins, the associate publisher, Rachel Bresler, and associate editor Abigail Holstein, both of whom have since left the company. Not because of me, but, they wrote me a letter, and I was shocked and said, have you ever thought of writing your memoirs? You must have some good rock stories. And I was pretty flabbergasted, and I immediately thought, oh, they just want a book of gossip because that's what everybody's doing. And actually, since that letter, there are so many of these books that have come out. And I thought, no, I couldn't do that. It's too cheesy. And I kept thinking about it. And I said, well, maybe they'll let me do something else. And I went and talked to them. And so I came up with this idea that if I could really write what I thought was a little kind of a picture of a person, which is me, going through the second half of the 20th century, everything that I saw in my environment, from coming from a very ethnic background right after the war, and getting involved in everything from the March on Washington, living next door to John Lennon, just all kinds of crazy things, the college years, the revolutions on campus, all that stuff. If I could kind of chronicle that, then it would have more meaning to me. And also my own personal stuff, which someone else might have come up with in this era as well, my health concerns, which are pretty serious. So they said, okay, you can give it a try. And so I did.
Yeah. And it is an amazing chronicling, and it's nice to be able to tell your own story, isn't it?
Well, I'll tell you, I never thought I would, but I always thought of my life, and maybe everybody's, as little stories. Like it's like Seinfeld, the marble rye. Oh, it's the day I couldn't find the mustard, and what happened at the airport. And all these are little short stories. And so what I try to do is to represent the different eras. I just picked different stories out of my head that would represent that era.
Exactly. So you came about to this business in an interesting way, and one of your early stories that you tell in the book, there's a really cute story about Cousin Brucey and meeting up with him in London.
Right. Well, Cousin Brucey, in case you don't know who he is, he's still one of the biggest DJs in the country. He's on Sirius Satellite right now, but he was on WABC in the 1960s, which was top 40 station at the time. And I would listen all the time. I just thought he was a really wacky, nice guy. I mean, I'd never met him. I knew he must be a little older. But there was a contest that in 1965 that a girl on Long Island won. And the contest was through Revlon Natural Wonder Makeup. And the prize was to go with Cousin Brucey to London to meet the Dave Clark Five, hang out at the Ad Lib Club where the Beatles hung out, go to a Ready, Steady, Go television show, and also the Brands Hatch racetrack. I remember all the prizes. Now, I loved the Beatles. I wasn't such a big Dave Clark fan, but that was okay. I still wanted to win, but I never did. And didn't expect to win. But my father was really nice, and he said, knowing nothing about the contest, said he wanted to take our family on a little 3-week vacation, that we'd never been anywhere. We were going to Europe, 2 cities each day. So the first day we were in London, my sister and I were in front of Buckingham Palace. And I looked over about, let's say, 20 feet. I said, Jane, look, it's Cousin Brucey. And so there he was. And so we went over to him. We're so excited to meet him, and we told him we knew about the contest and everything. And he has this funny little thing that he does with his voice, like, hey, my cousins. You have to know him to know what he does. And all of a sudden, my mother sees us talking to a strange man, and she comes through the crowd, and she says, and who are you? And he goes, I'm their Cousin Brucey. And she goes, I wasn't aware that we had a Bruce in the family, And at which point, he invited us to come along with the contest winner for all the prizes, and of course, Mommy said no. And my sister and I were crushed, and that night we had to go to the Royal Albert Hall for a ballet that, tickets had been given to them as a gift. And my sister and I sat through this ballet with steam coming out of our ears. Now, years later, I worked with Cousin Brucey, And then now I see him, I mean, the commercials and stuff like that. And now I see him every Saturday at Sirius Satellite. So he still calls me his little cousin, and he had me tell the story on the air. And just 2 weeks ago, I brought my sister up there to meet him after all these years. So.
But have you been back to the ballet?
No. No more ballet. No ballet.
See, Mom didn't make the right choice on that one. So then let's talk about the early start of your career as well, because you actually were a music director as well early on in Philly.
Yes, I was the music director, but at the time, nowadays everything means something else. And at that time, in a way, it was more important, but less important, because we added included just about every record that was released, because there really wasn't much to decide on. All these great records were coming out. It was the beginning of the rock era. And unless something was horrible and not a rock record, there's no reason not to add the record. So for that reason, it was less important, but it was very important that I got to see everything coming over my desk and got to meet all the artists, which I might have just being on the air as well, which I was, but I really did get to meet everybody in that capacity. So that was cool. Nowadays, a music director has a lot more corporate decision making and reporting and things like that, you know.
Yeah, and during these times in your career, you're meeting all these different rock stars and people, and as you said, you got to put that in there a little bit. You're very graceful about it.
I mean, I try to write a book where if there are bad guys, they're not in there, or I leave their name out. But there's certainly some. If you want to read the book, you'll certainly get some good stories, good dishy stories, I think, without making them, like. Some of these books, I mean, I can't believe what people write. You know,
it's out there forever now.
I know, and I can't believe that. So I don't think I wrote more in this book than I would. I knew I would have to do this if I wrote this book, because there's no way I could leave it out. So I try to put it in there the nicest way that I could. But yes, I did go out with a couple of these people, and I talk about it a little bit. But you're not going to get. Well, it'll be good. You'll get something out of it. I'm not going to discourage you.
And then MTV came along, and you were right there in the heart of course, you were married to Mark Goodman at that time. You actually auditioned to be a VJ, too.
Yes, I did audition to be a VJ, and I didn't make the cut. Somebody recently told me that they saw my audition, and it was just great, and something about, they would never have hired me because I was married to Mark. But I don't know if that's the reason or not. Whatever it is, they didn't hire me, but... I was fine with that because I never would have given up my radio job. But it would have been nice to be there too. But as it worked out, they don't play videos anymore, and I'm still on the radio. So,
right. See, who's got the better of that deal now?
And my boss of our corporation, Clear Channel, that I work for, huge media corporation, was the guy who invented MTV, and so he came back to radio as well. So.
But at that time, did it make you a little nervous that videos were now breaking artists more so than DJs?
Well, it did and it didn't. It made me nervous because I thought that all the music and program directors, as I mentioned in the book, were actually overreacting to the MTV by not supporting. It's a long story, by letting them do that and then not supporting the albums on the rock radio. It's kind of a long story that I have to get into to explain. But I really thought the radio's reaction to it was part of the problem. Although, of course, everybody's attention was focused now on MTV, but there were just certain limitations. You couldn't watch cable TV in a car. So, I mean, I never thought that it would take over the radio. But it would be in addition to it, which is sort of what happened.
People will often say now too, DJs don't have the influence they used to, but you can reach so many people now with satellite radio.
Well, it's not so much satellite radio. I have to really explain that regular radio, FM radio, actually has, in certain ways, a bigger reach. Well, I'll tell you why. Because, first of all, I may not pick all the music right now, but I certainly have a lot of information about it. I do pick some of it. I certainly can get information out there and talk about something new and encourage people. So in that way, I still have the same influence. We have, let's say, in our New York station, my station alone, 3 million listeners a week. And we have 5 stations, and there are about 1,000 stations in this company. And so they use a lot of the same material. In other words, if our morning guy does an interview, they'll have it on all the stations. So in fact, a lot of our stuff does get around. Plus, now we're on the computer and the phone, so we have the iHeartRadio. So you can listen to regular radio from any city wherever you are. So in that way, we have a bigger reach. Also, it's free. Satellite radio is a service, and people pay for it. So it's not the same kettle of fish. In different markets, it has more popularity than others, I would have to say. But certainly that's another way to reach people in a large area.
Are you surprised, though, still, Carol, that after 40 years there's still so few women in radio and it's still more of a male-dominated industry?
You know, strange, yes and no. I think there are more women than you realize. In fact, most stations just about have to have one or two, but in this country it usually is only one or two. Whereas in Europe, if you go there, it's, as I remember, especially from like French radio, it was the other way around. Yeah. So that's what I always found interesting, because there, when I was a kid and I went over there, I said, wow, look, all these women talking on the radio. Yeah. So,
yeah, and you've seen so many changes in the industry. Can you kind of see what's coming? What's next?
Question. That's a very good question. I'd like to see what I would hope would be next, which is a little common sense and all these gadgets and everything like that. It's just an overload. And I really think that it's going to come out in the wash, and people will see the importance of the signal coming from regular radio, and then if it's carried on a computer and this and that and the other thing, that's just great. But the concept of the radio station, I think, is not going to go away. The fact that there are people working there for you, I think that live people and information is essential, and when people think that their iPod is the same thing, that's just going to be a kind of temporary, I think they're going to realize that it's not.
And you've been out and about meeting the people, doing book signings and readings. What's been your favorite question so far?
Oh, that's a very interesting thing for you to ask. I don't really know. I've had people ask me, where was my favorite place to work? I know what my favorite question was, absolutely. Because I come from I would have to say, strict behavior background, an ethnic background that, I'm Jewish, but I came from an Orthodox neighborhood. My parents didn't follow all the rules, but that was the environment I grew up in, with not English speaking, Yiddish speaking, and very provincial and European in that way. We have all our issues and guilt and everything. And this woman asked me if because of my background, I could actually enjoy, and really enjoy all the wonderful experiences I've had. And I said, of course not. We have to have guilt and this and that. I can't really enjoy that much. I mean, I do enjoy it, but it was a very pertinent question. And the other part of the equation is that the thing that I've gotten most from people who've written to me, because I've gotten so many letters about the book through the radio station, because I know people know where to get a hold of me. They go, hi, I'm Italian Catholic. I can't believe we have the same background. You weren't allowed to do this. You weren't allowed to do that. Your family hated that you heard the music. You weren't allowed to see this television show. And they're telling me the same story. And I'm just really flabbergasted. It's good to know that we all have the same problem, except if you come from like a commune or something like that. So I don't know.
I know, I'm kind of thinking about my family too as you're telling this story. Well, the book is full of wonderful stories. And Carol, you're so honest in here, and you share also for the first time your cancer struggle. How are you feeling?
Right now, I think I'm okay. I had a recurrence of one thing last year, and I went through radiation again. I've had a hell of a lot, which in the book I tell the story that I knew I was going to get sick because most of the people in the family died. But I didn't know what from, because we never talked about it. I do get it, excuse me, but I don't tell anybody about it. I mean, the people at work knew, because I've had a lot of surgery, and I went through a lot of stuff, but I never mentioned it on the air, because it certainly wasn't something you did even 20 years ago, but I wouldn't want to do that anyway, because it's not what I do. I'm there to entertain. And the only reason I mention it in the book is because it's part of my story. If I can't tell my story, then I can't tell it,
Well, we can all learn a lot from your positive attitude. Carol, thank you so much for being here. The book is called Up All Night, My Life and Times in Rock Radio.
Oh, one thing I wanted to mention before we say goodbye is that 5% of sales royalties on this book I'm donating to the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, which is an amazing charity, which is about 97% or 99% of the funds go right to the doctors and the researchers. So you would be doing a very good deed if you bought the book.